On January 1st, 2010, the Rollercoaster male was no more. This great lion had found his final resting place. Even though the cards were heavily stacked against him, he was able to survive despite all the pressure he was exposed to in the last 2 years of his life. He and his brothers had sired many cubs, and although many of them had been killed, his bloodline would continue to flow in the Sparta Pride, the Styx Pride and the Southern Pride. With him gone, the Sparta Pride was about to fall apart, and a split was in the making. Mala Rangers reported that 2 days after his body had been found, 2 lionesses from the Sparta Pride were seen mating with Mr. T and Kinky Tail. Solo inherited the burden to protect the 7 subadults along with the oldest Sparta lioness. Although they were keeping a low profile and were extremely cautious, they lost another subadult lioness to an attack of Mr. T and Kinky Tail. The other Sparta lionesses, though, who had accepted them as their new pride males, gave birth to 3 male cubs in April 2010. The Styx Pride, though, had suffered the most in the past 12 months. They hadn't seen the Rollercoaster male in over a year. He had abandoned the Pride in early 2009 and had chosen to stay with the Sparta Pride. Most likely that was because of the presence of Solo, who made it possible for him to stay in charge of at least one Pride. The Styx Pride, though, was suffering one attack after another by Mr. T and Kinky Tail. They had lost 2 adult lionesses and 5 subadults in the last 8 months. The Styx Pride was finally getting a breather when Mr. T and Kinky Tail started to mate with the Sparta lionesses. They shifted their territory and spent more time up in the north in Arathusa, Simbambili and Juma. With that came another problem, because females are as territorial as males. By moving up north, the Styx trespassed the territory of the Tsalala Pride. This would lead to multiple confrontations between the prides and eventually the death of one Styx lioness. On a positive note, though, I'd like to mention that the 2 Styx breakaway lionesses started to spend more time with the core pride after they also had lost their cubs in a conflict with the Tsalala Pride. However, Mr. T and Kinky Tail were still their pride males, and they followed their calls when they wanted to mate again. While Mr. T and Kinky Tail were busy to take over the prides of the late Rollercoaster male, 5 young males coming from Kruger entered Sabi Sand in the beginning of 2010 in the northern region of their territory. They were nomads, and they were about 5 years old. At first they kept a very low profile, they didn't scentmark and they didn't roar. From time to time they went back into Kruger to pursue other prides. The first pride they were dominant over was the Fourways Pride, who had established their territory east of Mala in Kruger. It took them several months figuring out how many males they were up against. Even though Mr. T and Kinky Tail had their own territory to patrol, they never completely severed the bond with their older cousins. Before intruders work up the courage to make their presence known, they gather as much information as they can. They are not only listening to the roars, they are also analyzing the scent markings left behind by the dominant males and their females. Another pair who kept Mr. T and Kinky Tail busy were the Robson boys, One Eye and Stompy. They were hanging around Mala Mala at various times since 2009. In May 2010, they eventually clashed with the two Mapogo. They got away with their lives and they left Mala Mala, never to return. After 5 months spending in and out of Mapogo territory, the 5 Majingilane decided to make their presence known. On June 8, 2010 at 2:30 in the morning, they started to roar around Nkoro Bush Lodge. Mr. T and Kinky Tail heard the roars in Mala Mala, a couple of kilometers south of their position. They went straight up north to confront the trespassers. Their track record of dealing with intruders was astonishing. Even though they knew they were outnumbered, they didn't shy away from the fight. Numbers matter in the bush, but confidence does too. And up until this day, they had never lost one single fight. In the morning hours of June 8, 2010, one of the Majingilane would found himself on the receiving end of exactly that bravery and confidence that made other lions run for the hills. This young lion had been separated from his brothers during the night and was hiding under a bush. He watched Mr. T and Kinky Tail come closer. They hadn't seen him yet, but they knew he was there. As he watched them closing in, he suddenly panicked and shot out of his hiding place in an attempt to escape. It took Mr. T and Kinky Tail seconds until they got him and knocked him off his feet. While one held him down by his mane, the other did damage to his groin area. Even though the outcome of this fight was predictable, the young Majingilane bravely fought back and gave the Mapogo a taste of their own medicine. They eventually immobilized him by breaking his legs. Exhausted from the fight, they let go of him and left him there to die. While Mr. T's injuries were only superficial, Kinky Tail's paw had been bitten through and he was limping badly. Both males didn't move far from where they had left the Majingilane behind. Until nightfall, everything was calm. Rangers expected a full-blown roar, but it never came. Instead, they were just scent marking and attending their wounds. On a side note, roaring would have given away their position, and I guess they didn't want that. Rangers left them and went back to the lodge, and on the way back, they came across the 4 Majingilane. While they were eating dinner, they suddenly heard the 4 Majingilane roar, following by an instant response of the 2 Mapogo. No one had witnessed why Mr. T and Kinky Tail had parted ways or how they got separated that night. Rangers and guests arrived shortly after at the scene, catching up with them in an open area in front of Nkoro Bush Lodge. Kinky Tail appeared out of the tree line, sending powerful roars to the 4 intruders who were roaring back in defiance. What happened next had been described by Ranger Peter Rundle, who witnessed the entire ordeal. Kinky Tail started to chase the 4 Majingilane and accelerated to full speed, as if nothing ever happened to his front paw. The 4 Majingilane turned and ran away, disappearing into a drainage line. When they reappeared, they turned west and ran along the road, all 4 Majingilane in the front and Kinky Tail right behind them. They then approached another drainage line, and when they came out on the other side, there were only 3 lines left, 2 Majingilane and Kinky Tail. The other 2 Majingilane had somehow managed to get behind him. The 2 lines in front of him suddenly stopped, turned and faced him. Kinky Tail ran full speed into them and hit one of them so hard that he and the Majingilane went head over heels. The other one tackled Kinky Tail from behind, and only seconds later all 4 Majingilane were all over him. They mauled him for about 15 minutes badly until Mr. T suddenly showed up. Peter Rundle described the scene as if Mr. T had taken a minute to fully grasp what's happening in front of him. When he eventually realized that it was Kinky Tail who was pinned on the ground, he went in and pulled one of the Majingilane off his brother. Mr. T rolled him upside down and attacked him savagely. That triggered another Majingilane to let go of Kinky Tail and go after Mr. T instead. Now it was Mr. T that got cornered and attacked, and before it could get worse, he somehow managed to get free and ran for his life with 2 Majingilane hot on his heels. They returned shortly after, joining up with their brothers in attacking Kinky Tail once more. When they heard Mr. T roaring in the distance, they left Kinky Tail lying helpless on the side of the road and went after Mr. T again. They didn't get him, and a mix of frustration, dominance, power, and testosterone overwhelmed them. They returned to Kinky Tail to finish what they started, and it took Kinky Tail 20 long minutes to die. Consuming an opponent is not the norm in lion society, but they did. They were not satisfied by just killing him. They wanted to erase him. By next morning, Mr. T was back in Mala Mala, calling out for his brother, but he never replied. Rangers watched him making contact calls for days, as if he just couldn't accept that his brother was gone. The only answer he got were the roars from the Majingilane. On June 10, 2 days after they had killed Kinky Tail, the Majingilane were seen in Mala Mala searching for Mr. T. The next day, on June 11, tracks indicated that Mr. T had gone north to link up with the Tsalala pride. A couple of days later, there was another encounter between him and the Majingilane, and once more he could escape. Between June 20 and 26, Mr. T was in company of the Tsalala pride in Simbambili, where they were seen on several kills. On June 27, they killed a buffalo in Mala Mala, and on June 28, they suffered an attack from the Majingilane. And for the 3rd time, he barely escaped with his life. In that moment, he must have realized he couldn't hold on to his territory any longer. He crossed the Sand River and reunited with his older cousins. He left behind the Tsalala pride, who would suffer the loss of 2 subadults 1 day later. And he left behind the 2 Sparta lionesses, who had just showed their new cubs to the world. On July 2nd, the 5 Mapogo were eventually reunited. Even the boss, Makulu, accepted him back. But it wouldn't be a happy ending for everyone. As a band of 5 brothers, they went east to get back what was lost.